Okay, Jody Rubenstein, you should know. Okay, Jody, first question. How did you get involved in J Street?
Sure. So I actually it started with a trip on Birthright. On the summer between my 2 years of grad school, I went on Birthright, and from the moment I stepped off the plane, I grew up in Northern Virginia where there weren't a lot of other Jewish people and not a lot of Jews my age, and to get off the plane and have signs in Hebrew and everyone be Jewish. I mean, really, from the moment I landed, I was in love and not expecting that at all. And then there was another moment further on in the trip where we spent a night in the Bedouin tents, and they had the funny campy Bedouin tents, and they had us walk out into the desert, and we looked out. I mean, they had us walk away from the group, and we're looking up at the stars, and something about that experience, I felt like, while up until that point my Jewish identity hadn't been the most salient thing for me, and Israel hadn't been a huge part of that Jewish identity, all of a sudden I knew that this was a huge part of me, and that this was the land that my grandparents dreamed about in Poland, and that I had to bring my children here, that this was going to be part of my life forever. And so that was kind of the moment, that was a very pivotal moment for me, and deciding that I might want to dedicate my life to pro-Israel work. And I decided maybe within 24 hours that I wanted to live there. So when I finished grad school, I did a Massah program and lived in Israel for 5 months, and then had to come back and get a real job, make some money, but I kept staffing Birthright trips, and I was staffing a Birthright trip in it was January of 2013, so it was after Pillar of Defense in 2012, and someone was speaking to our group. We were at a kibbutz in the north, and the way that someone was asking him why he decides to stay there. He had made Aliyah from the States, from Ohio, and someone was asking why he decides to stay, given the security threats. And he said, well, this is my home, and I want to be here, and of course that, everyone deserves to be in a home where they feel safe. But then he said, and what I say is, screw the Arabs overlooking Syria and Lebanon. And I just felt like I knew there was such negativity coming from both sides on this issue, and that if I really wanted Israel to be a place where I could bring my children, if I really want Israel to exist as a Jewish democratic state into the future, that it wasn't going to happen if this is the way people on both sides were talking about the conflict. And so I came home and I was talking to my parents about it over dinner and expressing my concern, and my parents, who are both activists, said, well, that's great, Jody, what are you going to do about it? And I said, okay, fine. So I was working as a social worker at the time in New York, but I got connected with, I did a little bit of research and got connected with the J Street organizer in New York, and we had coffee, and she identified pretty quickly that I wanted to get involved, and she said, I've got this Purim event for you to help us organize, and I quickly became the co-chair of the Young Professionals Network in New York, and then that just sort of led to a few months later. I was feeling a little bit, I was doing J Street work with my door closed at my office, and really started thinking more and more about doing it full time, and a job came up with J Street U, and so I decided to move here, and then 2 years after that, still here in a different role, but it's been a really wonderful experience.
Great, and we're going to just pivot here a little bit for a few questions, because this is a very difficult and it is a very challenging time for Israel, and the Jewish community around the world, really. So I want to talk a little bit about J Street's work and kind of get your perspective on that, because I think it's important. And my next question is, Yes, given what is going on right now on the ground in Israel, the territories, the daily attacks on Israelis with knives, guns, vehicles, um, does J Street maintain its focus on the two-state solution, um, on a peaceful resolution to this conflict, when every single day we hear about a stabbing, a shooting, a car ramming, um, and really the focus on a lot of people's minds is just about security. So how does J Street, and what maybe you can say what some of the things you do, but how do you maintain your focus on a long-term solution when you have this daily violence going on?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the security is one of the things that drives me and a lot of folks at J Street the most, is this idea that, I have 6 cousins under the age of 8 who live in Israel. And so every time I see the news, they are who I think about. And so the question for me is, what can I be doing every day to help ensure security for them and for their future? And it is hard given everything that is happening, and it can be very frustrating. But I would say there are 2 things. One, Laura Friedman, who works for Americans for Peace now, she's brilliant and has been working on this issue for a really long time, and she always says that the reason that she works on this issue is because there is a solution. That there isn't, the reason she doesn't work on world hunger, or I think there are many reasons she works on this issue, but unlike something like world hunger, there's an answer, there's a solution, and she knows what it is. And so I have to believe that if we keep at the work we're doing, there is a positive outcome. I know what it could look like, and I feel fortunate that here at J Street, I think there are a lot of people doing a lot of thinking about the role of Americans and American Jews in getting us there, because to not do anything makes me feel so powerless. And there's nothing worse for me than feeling like I'm not part of the solution. I'm not part of moving forward productively. So even whatever's happening there, if there are any actions that I can take, I want to be part of that. And the other thing I'll say is that I think what we're seeing right now is what will continue to happen as long as we don't have a two-state solution. I mean, to me, this is the nightmare. And whether the solution comes in one day or 100 years, the difference will only be the amount of bloodshed. And I hope very sincerely that it is in less than 100 years. But I do believe that a two-state solution is the only solution.
Is that your vision, and is that J Street's vision? Is an Israel that is Jewish and democratic, at peace with a Palestinian state, living side by side in peace and security? Is that what J Street advocates? Is that what you advocate for, and is that what you'd like to see?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and what would you say to those in the pro-Israel, some in the pro-Israel Jewish community, who might be somewhat skeptical of J Street's intentions? I'm sure you've heard people talk about J Street that, well, maybe we have a big tent, but I don't know, some people aren't sure if it's big enough for a group like J Street. But what would you say to those who might be skeptical of J Street and their commitment to Israel?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I think, first, get to know us, read up on our positions. I think that there are a lot of people who, J Street, like other organizations, like things in life, it gets a reputation, and people, it's hearsay. Oh, I've heard this rumor about J Street, I've heard this thing about J Street. When you Google anything, you can get some pretty interesting results. And so I would say read our positions, and then let's have a conversation. I in no way think that everyone in the community is going to agree with J Street's policy positions, but let's make sure that the starting point is what our positions are. And I think along the lines of getting to know our positions,